Hello, friends. Welcome back to Expertly Weird. Go ahead, get comfy. The air smells like pine smoke, ancient sweat, and the distant echo of a trumpet blown by someone in a toga. Wrap yourself in a blanket, pour something warm, tea, wine, olive oil, again, not here to judge, and settle in. Because tonight's story? It's epic, it's sweaty. It's what happens when ancient Greeks get really competitive, really religious, and a little too into being naked in public. This is the story of how and why the Olympic Games were created. Not just the medals and marketing you know today, but the real origin, where sports, sacrifice, and divine ego all collided under the scorching sun of Olympia. Let's dive in. Picture this. You're standing in a massive stadium surrounded by thousands of roaring spectators. Athletes from every corner of the globe are about to compete in the most prestigious sporting event on Earth. The Olympic flame burns bright above you, and for a moment you feel connected to something ancient, something powerful, something that transcends borders and languages. But have you ever wondered why this exists at all? Tonight, we're diving deep into one of history's most fascinating questions. Why were the Olympics created? And I'm not talking about some surface-level explanation you might find in a textbook. We're going archaeological on this thing. We're talking ancient Greek politics, religious ceremonies that would make your jaw drop, and power struggles that shaped civilizations. Before we begin this journey together, take a second to hit that like button if you're genuinely curious about the stories that shaped our world, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far these ancient stories can travel. Now settle in, maybe grab something to drink, because what you're about to discover will completely change how you see the Olympics forever. Most people think they know the story. Ancient Greeks, athletic competition, olive wreaths, done. But that's like saying the Mona Lisa is just a painting of a woman. The real story is so much deeper, so much stranger, and so much more relevant to our modern world than you could possibly imagine. The year is 776 BCE. Greece isn't even Greece as we know it. It's a collection of independent city-states, each with their own armies, their own gods, their own fierce pride. These aren't friendly neighbours sharing recipes over the fence. These are rival powers constantly on the edge of war. Athens despises Sparta. Sparta looks down on Corinth. Everyone's suspicious of everyone else. Sound familiar? But every 4 years, something miraculous happened. A sacred truce was declared. Weapons were laid down. Safe passage was guaranteed. Warriors became spectators, and athletes became the new warriors. This wasn't just about sports. This was about survival. You see, the ancient Greeks had a problem. They were brilliant at philosophy, art, architecture, and democracy. They were also brilliant at killing each other. These city-states were locked in an endless cycle of warfare that was slowly destroying their civilization from within. They needed something to unite them, something sacred enough that even the most bloodthirsty general would respect it. Enter Olympia, not the Olympics as we know them, but a religious sanctuary in the western Peloponnese dedicated to Zeus, the king of the gods. This place was already sacred, already neutral ground where different tribes could meet without fear. But someone, and we're not entirely sure who, had a genius idea. What if they turned this religious gathering into something more? What if they created a competition so prestigious, so spiritually significant, that it could actually stop wars? The first Olympic Games weren't just athletic contests. They were religious festivals that lasted 5 days and included sacrifices, prayers, and ceremonies that would make modern sporting events look like casual picnics. The athletes weren't just competing for personal glory. They were competing as representatives of their gods, their cities, and their ancestors. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Greeks didn't create the Olympics because they loved sports. They created them because they understood something profound about human nature. They realized that competition could be channeled, controlled, and transformed into something that brought people together instead of tearing them apart. Think about it. These were people who lived in a world where physical strength meant survival, where being faster, stronger, or more skilled could mean the difference between life and death in battle. But instead of only using these abilities to destroy each other, they created a space where they could celebrate them, honour them, and use them to forge connections across political boundaries. The original Olympic events weren't random choices. Each one had deep cultural significance. The Stadion, a sprint of roughly 200 metres, honoured speed and decisiveness. The pentathlon combined 5 different skills that any well-rounded warrior should possess. Wrestling and boxing celebrated strength and technique. The chariot race was the ultimate display of wealth and prestige, since only the richest could afford to maintain horses and chariots. And then there was the pancration, a brutal combination of wrestling and boxing with almost no rules. Competitors could punch, kick, choke, and break bones. The only things forbidden were biting and eye gouging. This wasn't entertainment. This was a way for warriors to prove their worth without actually killing each other. Every victor received the same prize, a simple olive wreath cut from a sacred tree. No money, no endorsement deals, no appearance fees, just a crown of leaves that would wither and die within days. But that olive wreath represented something priceless. It meant you were favoured by the gods. It meant your city-state had divine approval. It meant you were part of something eternal. The religious aspect cannot be overstated. These games took place in a sanctuary, where the most magnificent temple housed a 40-foot-tall gold and ivory statue of Zeus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Athletes would make sacrifices before competing, and the entire event was overseen by priests who ensured that every rule, every ritual, every tradition was followed exactly. But the Olympics served another crucial purpose that's often overlooked. They were a massive intelligence-gathering operation. Think about it. Representatives from every major Greek city-state would gather in one place, sharing information about military capabilities, political alliances, trade opportunities, and social developments. Spies could observe potential enemies up close. Diplomats could negotiate treaties. Merchants could establish new trading relationships. The Games became a kind of United Nations for the ancient world, a place where the complex web of Greek politics could be managed through competition rather than warfare. The sacred truce, known as the ekecheria, wasn't just a nice gesture. It was a practical necessity that allowed this delicate system to function. And it worked. For nearly 12 centuries, the Olympic Games continued. They survived the rise and fall of Athens. They survived the Spartan hegemony. They survived the conquests of Alexander the Great and the rise of the Roman Empire. The Games became so important, so central to Greek identity, that they continued even after Greece lost its political independence. The Romans, initially suspicious of Greek customs, eventually embraced the Olympics wholeheartedly. Roman emperors competed in the Games, sometimes with results that were, shall we say, diplomatically predetermined. Nero famously won the chariot race, despite falling off his chariot and failing to finish the race. When you're the emperor, apparently, showing up is enough. But the deeper purpose remained. The Olympics represented something that transcended politics, something that connected people to their shared humanity through the pursuit of excellence. The Greek word for this concept was arete, often translated as virtue or excellence, but it meant something more. It meant the realization of human potential, the idea that through struggle and competition, people could become the best versions of themselves. This wasn't just about individual achievement. The Greeks believed that when someone achieved arete, it elevated their entire community. A victorious athlete brought honor not just to themselves, but to their family, their city, and their gods. The competition became a way for communities to invest in their own excellence, to push their members to heights they might never reach on their own. The training required was extraordinary. Athletes would spend years preparing, following strict diets, rigorous exercise routines, and precise techniques passed down through generations. They would travel to Olympia months before the Games to train under the supervision of official judges called Hellenodikai, who would determine if they were worthy to compete. Only freeborn Greek men could participate, which tells us something important about who the games were really for. This wasn't about universal human brotherhood. This was about Greek superiority, about proving that Greek culture, Greek training methods, and Greek values produced the finest human specimens on earth. Women were not only excluded from competing, they were forbidden from even watching the games on pain of death. There was exactly one exception. The priestess of Demeter was allowed to observe from a special throne. This wasn't about equality. This was about a very specific vision of Greek masculine excellence. Yet despite these limitations, the Olympics planted seeds of ideas that would eventually grow into something much larger. The concept that competition could unite rather than divide. The idea that physical excellence was worthy of celebration. The belief that human potential could be pushed to extraordinary limits through dedication and training. The games created heroes whose stories spread throughout the known world. Men like Milo of Croton, who won the wrestling competition 6 times and was said to carry a full-grown bull on his shoulders, or Leonidas of Rhodes, who won 12 events across 4 different Olympics, a record that stood for over 2,000 years. These weren't just athletes. They were living proof of what humans could achieve, walking advertisements for the power of Greek culture and training. Their victories were celebrated with statues, poems, and festivals back home. Some were even worshipped as minor gods after their deaths. But the Olympics also revealed the darker side of competition. Cheating was common enough that officials developed elaborate systems to catch and punish offenders. Athletes who violated the rules were forced to pay for bronze statues of Zeus, called Zanes, which were erected along the path to the stadium with inscriptions describing their crimes. These served as permanent reminders that even in sacred competition, humans remained flawed. Political tensions often boiled over despite the sacred truce. City-states would accuse each other of fielding ineligible athletes. Judges were sometimes bribed. Spectators would riot when decisions went against their favourites. The Olympics were supposed to transcend human nature, but they often simply revealed it in all its messy complexity. Yet the games endured because they served a need deeper than politics or religion. They gave people a way to dream, to imagine human potential pushed to its absolute limits. They created shared stories, common heroes, and collective experiences that bound Greek culture together across centuries of political upheaval. The Olympics weren't created because the Greeks loved sports. They were created because the Greeks understood that humans need something to aspire to, something that elevates them above the daily struggle for survival. They understood that competition, properly channeled, could become a form of worship, a celebration of the divine spark within humanity. This ancient vision would lie dormant for over 1,500 years, buried beneath the collapse of the classical world, waiting for someone to rediscover its power and adapt it for a new age. But that's a story for our next chapter. The story picks up in the 4th century CE, when Emperor Theodosius I made a decision that would echo through history. Christianity was rising, and the old gods were falling. The Olympic Games, with their pagan rituals and naked athletes honouring Zeus, had become an embarrassment to the new Christian order. In 393 or 394 CE, the Games were officially banned. The sacred flame was extinguished. The statues were toppled. The temples crumbled into ruins. For over 14 centuries, the Olympics existed only in memory and scattered historical texts. The world moved on. Empires rose and fell. The Renaissance brought new ideas about human potential. The Industrial Revolution transformed how people lived and worked. But something was missing. That ancient dream of human excellence, celebrated on a global stage, had vanished from the world. Then came a man who would change everything. Pierre de Coubertin wasn't an athlete. He wasn't particularly interested in sports for their own sake. He was a French educator who looked around at the world of the late 1800s and saw something troubling. France had been humiliated by Prussia in the Franco-Prussian War. The country felt weak, demoralized, defeated. Traditional French education focused on intellectual pursuits while ignoring physical development. Boys were bookish but frail. Coubertin believed this was destroying French society from within. He'd studied British education and was fascinated by the emphasis on athletics at schools like Rugby and Eton. These institutions seemed to produce confident, physically capable leaders who could govern an empire. The British approach combined mental and physical training in a way that created what they called muscular Christianity, the idea that a strong body housed a strong character. But Coubertin's vision went far beyond fixing French education. He was living through an age of rising nationalism, colonial expansion, and technological revolution that was making the world both more connected and more dangerous. He saw countries racing to build bigger armies, more powerful weapons, and more extensive empires. He worried that this competition would eventually tear civilization apart. What if there was another way? What if the competitive instincts that drove nations toward war could be channeled into something constructive? What if you could create a global gathering that celebrated human achievement rather than human destruction? Coubertin had read about the ancient Olympics, but he wasn't trying to recreate the past. He was trying to solve the problems of his present. The modern world needed modern solutions, but it could learn from ancient wisdom. The Greeks had understood something profound about the power of athletic competition to unite rather than divide. In 1892, at a meeting of the Athletic Sports Union in Paris, Coubertin made his pitch. He called for the revival of the Olympic Games, but not as a Greek festival, as an international celebration of human potential that would rotate between different countries, include athletes from every nation, and promote peace through friendly competition. The response was lukewarm. Most people thought the idea was impractical, unrealistic, maybe even dangerous. How could you trust athletes from hostile nations to compete peacefully? How could you prevent the Games from becoming another arena for political conflict? How could you organize something so massive and complex in an age before modern communication and transportation? But Coubertin was relentless. He spent 2 years building support, writing letters, giving speeches, and convincing influential people that his vision could work. He established the International Olympic Committee in 1894 with representatives from 9 countries. He chose Athens as the site for the first modern games, honouring the ancient tradition while signalling that this was something new. The first modern Olympics in 1896 almost didn't happen. The Greek government was nearly bankrupt and couldn't afford to host an international event. Public enthusiasm was low. International participation was questionable. Coubertin himself worried that his dream would die before it could begin. But something magical occurred as the Games approached. Greek national pride kicked in. They couldn't let the world see them fail at hosting an event that honoured their ancestors. Donations poured in from wealthy Greeks around the world. George Averoff, a businessman from Alexandria, paid for the restoration of the ancient Panathenaic Stadium. King George I threw his support behind the project. The Games opened on April 6, 1896, with 241 athletes from 14 nations competing in 43 events. By modern standards, it was tiny. Only men competed. Most athletes were from Europe or North America. Some events had fewer than 5 participants, but the symbolism was enormous. For the first time in over 1,500 years, athletes from different nations were gathering to compete in peaceful celebration of human excellence. The marathon, a new event created to honour the legendary run from Marathon to Athens, captured the world's imagination when Greek postal worker Spyros Lewis won in front of his home crowd. The early modern Olympics faced massive challenges that would have killed a less ambitious dream. The 1900 Paris Olympics were overshadowed by the World's Fair and stretched out over 5 months. Many athletes didn't even realise they were competing in the Olympics. The 1904 St. Louis Olympics were even worse, dominated by American competitors and marred by bizarre events like anthropological exhibitions that displayed indigenous peoples as curiosities. But Coubertin persisted because he understood that he was building something bigger than a sporting event. He was creating a new form of international diplomacy, a way for nations to compete that didn't require armies or weapons. He was establishing a global language of excellence that could transcend political boundaries. The Stockholm Olympics of 1912 proved that the vision was working. Athletes from 28 nations competed, including the first participants from Asia and Africa. The games were well organized, widely covered by the press, and genuinely international in character. Jim Thorpe's dominance in the pentathlon and decathlon made him a global celebrity and symbol of athletic perfection. World War I nearly destroyed the Olympic movement before it could fully mature. The 1916 Berlin Olympics were cancelled. The world was learning that technology could make warfare more devastating than ever before. Millions died in trenches. Entire empires collapsed. The optimistic belief in human progress that had fueled Coubertin's vision seemed naive in the face of such carnage. But when the Olympics resumed in Antwerp in 1920, they carried new meaning. These weren't just games anymore. They were proof that civilization could survive, that nations could choose cooperation over destruction, that humans could aspire to something higher than mutual annihilation. The Olympic flame was reintroduced, creating a direct connection to the ancient games. The Olympic oath was established, with athletes promising to compete fairly and honour the spirit of sportsmanship. The Olympic motto, Citius, Altius, Fortius, meaning faster, higher, stronger, encapsulated the endless human drive for improvement. Each Olympics built on the foundation, adding new sports, welcoming new nations, breaking new records. The Paris Olympics of 1924 included 44 nations and over 3,000 athletes. Women began competing in more events, though progress was slow and often controversial. The Games were becoming a true reflection of global diversity and human potential. But the Olympics also revealed how easily noble ideals could be corrupted by political ambition. The 1936 Berlin Olympics became Adolf Hitler's showcase for Nazi ideology. He intended to use the Games to demonstrate Aryan superiority and German organisational prowess. Instead, Jesse Owens' 4 gold medals in track and field became one of the most powerful refutations of racial supremacy in history. The image of Owens, an African-American athlete, dominating events while Hitler watched from the stands, captured something essential about the Olympic ideal. Excellence knows no race, nationality, or political system. The human capacity for greatness transcends the artificial barriers that societies create. Yet the Olympics couldn't escape the political tensions of their era. The Cold War turned the Games into proxy battles between communist and capitalist ideologies. Countries used medal counts as measures of national superiority. Athletes became symbols of political systems rather than individual achievements. The 1972 Munich Olympics brought terrorism to the world's biggest stage when Palestinian militants killed 11 Israeli athletes. The Games continued after a brief suspension, but the innocence of Olympic competition had been shattered. The world learned that not even the most sacred international gathering was immune to political violence. Through all these challenges, the core vision survived because it addressed something fundamental about human nature. People need heroes. They need stories of ordinary individuals achieving extraordinary things. They need proof that limits can be overcome, records can be broken, and human potential is boundless. The Olympics provided a stage for these stories on a scale never before imagined. Muhammad Ali lighting the Olympic flame in Atlanta, Nadia Comaneci's perfect 10 in gymnastics, Michael Phelps's 8 gold medals in Beijing, Usain Bolt's world records in sprinting. These moments transcended sports and became part of global cultural memory. But perhaps most importantly, the Olympics created a shared language of human excellence. A Kenyan marathon runner and a Chinese gymnast might not speak the same language or understand each other's cultures, but they both understand the dedication required to compete at the highest level. They both know what it means to push beyond perceived limitations. The modern Olympics weren't created to revive an ancient festival. They were created to solve the problems of an interconnected world struggling with nationalism, technological change, and the need for peaceful international cooperation. Coubertin and his followers understood that humans will always compete. The question is whether that competition will destroy us or inspire us to become better than we thought possible. Today's Olympics face new challenges. Commercialization threatens to overshadow athletic achievement. Doping scandals undermine faith in fair competition. Political boycotts and protests disrupt the ideal of neutral sporting space. The massive costs of hosting the Games create financial burdens that few cities can bear. Yet these modern challenges pale in comparison to what the Olympics have accomplished. They've survived 2 world wars, the Cold War, terrorist attacks, boycotts, and countless political crises. They've done this because they represent something that goes deeper than politics or money. They represent the human refusal to accept limitations. Consider what happens when an Olympic Games begins. For 2.5 weeks, the world's attention focuses on a single place, where the only thing that matters is who can run fastest, jump highest, or perform with the most grace under pressure. National borders become irrelevant. Political systems become secondary. What matters is the pursuit of human excellence in its purest form. This isn't accidental. It's the result of a vision that understood something profound about what humans need to thrive. We need to see what's possible. We need proof that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things through dedication and sacrifice. We need heroes who show us that our limitations are often self-imposed. The ancient Greeks called this concept arete, the pursuit of excellence for its own sake. They believed that when someone achieved their highest potential, it elevated not just themselves, but their entire community. The modern Olympics took this idea and scaled it up to encompass the entire human family. Think about the stories that emerge from every Olympic Games. Athletes who overcome poverty, disability, or political oppression to compete on the world's biggest stage. Countries that send their first ever Olympic team, carrying the hopes of entire nations. Veterans who compete decades after their first Games, proving that excellence isn't limited by age. These narratives matter because they provide templates for how to live. They show us that success requires not just talent, but persistence, sacrifice, and the willingness to fail repeatedly in pursuit of a goal that might be impossible. They demonstrate that competition can bring out the best in people rather than the worst. The Paralympic Games, which began as a small gathering for World War II veterans with spinal injuries, exemplify this perfectly. What started as rehabilitation became revelation. Athletes with disabilities weren't just competing despite their limitations. They were redefining what human performance could look like. They were showing the world that excellence takes many forms. Oscar Pistorius running on carbon fiber blades, swimmer Tanny Thompson winning 11 Paralympic gold medals, archer Matt Stutzman, born without arms, competing with his feet. These athletes didn't just inspire disabled people, they expanded everyone's understanding of human potential. The Winter Olympics added another dimension to this vision. Sports that required not just physical excellence, but the courage to hurtle down mountains at impossible speeds or perform aerial acrobatics on skis. The combination of athleticism and artistry in figure skating. The teamwork and strategy of ice hockey. The pure endurance of cross-country skiing. Each new sport added to the Olympic program brought fresh opportunities to celebrate different aspects of human capability. Surfing honoured humanity's relationship with nature. Skateboarding celebrated creativity and individual expression. Sport climbing showcased problem-solving under pressure. The each other. Provide heroes who could the deeper purpose remained constant. Create a space where nations could compete without killing. Olympics evolved because human excellence is constantly evolving. but establish traditions that would outlast political systems, inspire people to push beyond their perceived limitations, and economic changes, build something that connected people to their shared humanity. The Olympic Village became a symbol of this vision. Athletes from every continent living together, sharing meals, trading pins, learning about each other's cultures. Competitors who might represent hostile nations on paper became friends over late-night conversations and shared training sessions. The village proved that political conflicts were often artificial barriers that dissolved when people met as individuals. Of course, politics never completely disappeared from the Olympics. The 1980 Moscow boycott led by the United States. The 1984 Los Angeles boycott led by the Soviet Union. The ongoing debates about which athletes should be allowed to compete and under what circumstances. The persistent questions about performance-enhancing drugs and fair play. These controversies revealed the Olympics' greatest weakness and greatest strength. They couldn't transcend human nature entirely. Athletes would still cheat. Nations would still use the games for propaganda. Money would still corrupt pure competition. But the ideals survived because they addressed something essential about what humans need to flourish. The technological revolution of the late 20th and early 21st centuries transformed the Olympics in ways Coubertin never could have imagined. Television brought the games into homes around the world, creating a truly global audience. The internet allowed people to follow their favourite athletes year-round. Social media gave competitors direct connections to their fans, but technology also created new challenges. The cost of broadcasting rights inflated Olympic budgets beyond what many cities could afford. The pressure of global scrutiny intensified the already enormous stress on athletes. The constant connectivity made it harder for competitors to focus solely on their performance. Yet the core appeal remained unchanged. People still gathered around screens to watch humans attempt the impossible. They still celebrated records being broken and underdog victories. They still felt that connection to something larger than themselves when they witnessed genuine excellence. The COVID-19 pandemic provided the ultimate test of the Olympic ideal. The 2020 Tokyo Olympics, postponed for a year and held without international spectators, could have been a disaster. Instead, they proved that the Olympics were bigger than any single element. The competition continued, records fell, new heroes emerged. The world watched even from a distance, athletes competing in empty stadiums, separated from their families, following strict health protocols, demonstrated something profound about human resilience. They showed that the pursuit of excellence doesn't require perfect conditions. It requires commitment to something greater than immediate circumstances. The stories from Tokyo were as compelling as any in Olympic history. Caleb Dressel's swimming dominance, Elaine Thompson-Herah's sprint records, the remarkable performances by athletes like Allyson Felix competing in her final Olympics, Norway's cross-country skiing dynasty continuing with new champions. But perhaps the most significant moment came when Simone Biles withdrew from several gymnastics events to prioritise her mental health. The decision sparked global conversations about athlete welfare, the pressure of competition, and the importance of seeking help when needed. It was a reminder that even the greatest competitors are human beings with limits that must be respected. The Olympics continue to evolve because the world continues to change. Climate change affects where winter games can be held. Geopolitical tensions influence which countries can safely host and attend. Economic inequality determines which athletes have access to world-class training. Then a complete gender equality remains an ongoing project rather than achievement. New sports are added to reflect changing interests and demographics. Breaking, skateboarding, and surfing brought youth culture to the Olympics. The mixed gender events acknowledge that competition doesn't always have to be separated by sex. The refugee team gave hope to displaced people around the world. Each adaptation serves the original purpose. Find new ways to celebrate human excellence, create opportunities for people to see what's possible when talent meets dedication. Provide a stage where individual achievement can inspire collective progress. The ancient Greeks who first gathered in Olympia to honor Zeus through athletic competition could never have imagined their festival becoming a global phenomenon involving thousands of athletes from hundreds of nations. But they would have understood the essential purpose: use competition to bring out the best in people, create heroes whose stories inspire others, build traditions that connect communities across time and space. Pierre de Coubertin, dreaming of a way to channel nationalist competition into peaceful celebration, could never have predicted television audiences in the billions or athletes competing for prize money in the millions. But he would have recognized the fundamental achievement: nations gathering to compete without weapons, young people pushing themselves to extraordinary levels of performance, a global community united by shared appreciation for excellence. The Olympics weren't created because someone loved sports. They were created because someone understood that humans need inspiration, need heroes, need proof that limitations can be overcome. They were created because competition, properly channeled, can unite rather than divide. They were created because excellence, properly celebrated, can elevate entire civilizations. This is why the Olympics matter. Not because they're perfect, but because they represent humanity's ongoing effort to be better than we are. Every 4 years for 2.5 weeks, the world agrees to celebrate the best in human performance. We agree to honor dedication, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of improvement. In an age of division, the Olympics remind us what ism. They provide authentic heroes. In a time we share, in an era of sin of instant gratification, they celebrate the patience required for true achievement. They exist because we need them to exist, because something in human nature demands that we reach for the highest peaks of what's possible. The flame that burns in Olympic stadiums around the world isn't just honouring ancient Greek traditions. It's celebrating the fire that burns within every person who refuses to accept that good enough is good enough. It's honouring everyone who has ever trained when they didn't feel like training to ensure they could win, competed when they thought was possible. That, and pushed beyond what they flame, represents the reason the Olympics were created and the reason they endure. Because excellence is contagious, because inspiration spreads, because when we see what humans can achieve at their best, we can't help but wonder what we might achieve at ours. The Olympics today face questions that would have seemed impossible to the athletes who first gathered in ancient Olympia or the visionaries who revived the Games in 1896. Can an event rooted in celebrating human achievement survive in an age where everything is measured by profit margins and social media metrics? Can the Olympic ideal of peaceful competition endure when nations use cyber warfare and economic sanctions as weapons? Can the Games maintain their relevance when younger generations are more interested in esports than track and field? Yet these challenges miss the deeper truth about why the Olympics were created and why they continue to matter. The Games weren't built to be perfect, they were built to be necessary. Consider what happens in the months leading up to each Olympics. Around the world, in training facilities from Kenya to Kazakhstan, athletes wake up before dawn to pursue dreams that most people would consider unrealistic. A teenage swimmer in Australia logs thousands of laps in chlorinated water, chasing times measured in hundredths of seconds. A weightlifter in Bulgaria lifts impossibly heavy objects over and over, seeking to add just a few more kilograms to a personal best. A figure skater in Canada practices the same jump until muscle memory replaces conscious thought. These athletes aren't training because they love suffering. They're training because the Olympics give their suffering meaning. The Games provide a destination for all that sacrifice, a stage worthy of their dedication, a reason to push beyond reasonable limits. This is what the ancient Greeks understood and what Coubertin rediscovered. Humans need something to strive for that's bigger than daily survival. We need goals that require the best version of ourselves. We need proof that excellence is possible, even if it's rare. The Paralympic movement exemplifies this perfectly. What began as a small rehabilitation program for injured veterans has become a global celebration of human adaptability. Paralympic athletes don't compete despite their disabilities. They compete because their unique circumstances have revealed new forms of excellence that the able-bodied world never imagined. Watch a blind sprinter running at full speed, trusting completely in their guide's voice. See a swimmer with no arms powering through the water, using only their legs and core. Witness a wheelchair racer navigating tight turns at speeds that would terrify most drivers. These athletes aren't inspiring because they've overcome obstacles. They're inspiring because they've redefined what human performance can look like. The Special Olympics take this concept even further. Founded by Eunice Kennedy Shriver in 1968, these games celebrate athletes with intellectual disabilities who compete not for world records or endorsement deals, but for the pure joy of participation and improvement. The Special Olympics oath captures something essential. Let me win. But if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. This philosophy connects directly to the original Olympic vision. Excellence isn't just about being the fastest or strongest. It's about becoming the best version of yourself, whatever that might mean. It's about the courage to attempt something difficult, knowing you might fail. The Youth Olympics, established in 2010, address another crucial aspect of the Olympic mission. These games bring together teenage athletes from around the world, many of whom are competing internationally for the first time. The focus isn't just on winning, but on education, cultural exchange, and developing the values that will guide these young people throughout their lives. Watch a 16-year-old swimmer from a small island nation stand next to their idol before a race. See teenagers from countries with complicated political relationships sharing meals and trading stories. Witness young athletes learning that their opponents aren't enemies, but fellow travelers on the same difficult journey toward excellence. These moments of connection happen because the Olympics create a unique space in human experience. For 2.5 weeks, the normal rules of international relations are suspended. Countries that might be trading insults at the United Nations are cheering for each other's athletes. People who might never meet under any other circumstances are united by their appreciation for extraordinary performance. The Olympic Village embodies this transformation. Athletes who've spent years focused entirely on individual preparation suddenly find themselves part of a global community. Language barriers disappear when a gymnast demonstrates a technique to competitors from different continents. Cultural differences become fascinating rather than threatening when a distance runner explains their training methods to athletes from opposite sides of the world. This doesn't mean the Olympics are free from politics or controversy. Every Games brings new challenges, doping scandals that undermine fair competition, corruption investigations that taint the selection of host cities, protests that turn sporting venues into political stages, environmental concerns about the massive infrastructure required for modern Olympics. But these problems exist precisely because the Olympics matter so much. People fight over the Games because they recognize their power. Nations want to host because they understand the global platform the Olympics provide. Athletes risk everything to compete because they know Olympic achievement creates a different kind of immortality. Think about the Olympic moments that transcend sports and become part of human cultural memory. Jesse Owens in Berlin, proving that excellence knows no race. Muhammad Ali lighting the flame in Atlanta, transformed from controversial figure to beloved symbol of courage. The miracle on ice when amateur American hockey players defeated the seemingly invincible Soviet team. Nadia Comaneci's perfect 10, showing that human performance could literally break the scoring system. These moments matter because they provide templates for how to live. They show us what becomes possible when talent meets preparation, meets opportunity. They demonstrate that individuals can make history, that single performances can inspire millions, that human potential is far greater than we typically imagine. The technology revolution has amplified this effect exponentially. Social media allows athletes to share their journeys directly with fans, creating connections that would have been impossible in earlier eras. Streaming platforms provide access to sports that rarely receive mainstream coverage. Advanced analytics help us understand and appreciate the subtle elements that separate good from great. But technology has also created new pressures and expectations. Athletes compete not just against their opponents, but against their own social media personas. Every training session might be filmed and analysed. Every interview could become viral content. The line between athletic performance and entertainment has blurred in ways that complicate the Olympic ideal. Despite these challenges, the fundamental appeal remains unchanged. Humans are drawn to stories of transformation, of ordinary people achieving extraordinary things through dedication and sacrifice. The Olympics provide these stories on the largest possible stage, with the highest possible stakes. Consider the economic impact of Olympic dreams. Countries invest billions in training facilities, coaching programs, and athlete support systems. The return on this investment isn't measured in gold medals alone, and the inspiration provided to future, but in national pride, international recognition generations. Small nations use Olympic success to announce their presence on the world stage. Larger countries use the Games to demonstrate their commitment to excellence and their ability to organize complex international events. Host cities transform their infrastructure and global profile through the temporary privilege of welcoming the world's athletes. But perhaps the most significant impact is personal rather than political. Every Olympic cycle creates thousands of athletes who've experienced what it means to pursue excellence at the highest level. Most will never win medals. Many will never even qualify for their national teams. But all will have learned something profound about human potential and the price of pursuing it. These athletes become coaches, teachers, business leaders, and parents who carry Olympic values into their communities. They understand the relationship between preparation and performance, between individual effort and team success, between short-term sacrifice and long-term achievement. The ripple effects extend far beyond sports. Olympic training methods influence military preparation, corporate leadership development, and educational philosophy. The psychological techniques athletes use to perform under pressure become tools for managing stress in any high-stakes situation. Medical advances driven by the need to help athletes recover faster and perform better benefit everyone. Nutritional research aimed at optimizing athletic performance improves public health understanding. Equipment innovations designed for Olympic competition often find applications in everyday life. The Olympics justify their existence not just through the 2 weeks of competition every 4 years, but through the countless ways they influence human culture and development. They create a global language of excellence that transcends political boundaries and cultural differences. This is why the ancient Greeks created their version of the Games, and why Coubertin revived them for the modern world. Not because they loved sports for their own sake, but because they understood that humans need inspiration, need heroes, need proof that limitations can be overcome. The flame that travels from Olympia to each Olympic venue isn't just honouring ancient traditions, it's carrying forward a promise that excellence is possible, that dedication will be rewarded, that the human spirit can triumph over seemingly impossible odds. Every time that flame is lit, it reminds us why the Olympics were created, to give us something to aspire to show us what we might achieve if we're willing to pay the price, to prove that in a world often divided by politics, religion, and economics, we can still come together to celebrate the best of what humans can become. The Olympics exist because we need them to exist, because something in human nature demands that we reach for the highest peaks of possibility. Because excellence, properly celebrated, elevates not just the individuals who achieve it, but the entire species that witnesses it. That's the real answer to why the Olympics were created, not for the glory of nations or the profit of sponsors or the entertainment of spectators, but for the elevation of human potential itself, for the promise that whatever we think our limits might be, someone somewhere is working to prove us wrong. And in that endless pursuit of something higher, faster, stronger, we find not just athletic achievement, but a reflection of humanity's greatest aspiration, to become more than we thought possible. The story of the Olympics is ultimately the story of humanity's refusal to accept mediocrity as the final answer. But as we've seen, this refusal comes with a cost that most people never consider. Every Olympic champion represents not just individual achievement, but the accumulated dreams of countless others who tried and fell short. For every swimmer who touches the wall first, there are hundreds who trained just as hard but missed qualifying by fractions of seconds. For every gymnast who sticks a perfect landing, there are dozens who suffered career-ending injuries pursuing the same routine. This harsh mathematics of excellence reveals something uncomfortable about the Olympic ideal. The Games don't just celebrate success, they're built on a foundation of failure, sacrifice, and broken dreams. Most athletes who dedicate their lives to Olympic sports will never reach the podium. They'll retire with nothing to show for their efforts, except the knowledge that they gave everything in pursuit of something extraordinary. Yet this reality doesn't diminish the Olympic vision. It validates it. Because the athletes who never win medals still experience the transformation that comes from pursuing excellence. They still learn what it means to push beyond perceived limitations. They still discover reserves of strength and determination they never knew they possessed. The parents who mortgage their homes to fund their child's training. The coaches who work multiple jobs to support promising athletes. The communities that rally around local Olympic hopefuls. All of them are investing in something that statistics tell us is unlikely to succeed. But they do it anyway because they understand that the pursuit itself has value. So the next time you watch an Olympic ceremony, when you see that flame burning bright against the night sky, remember this. You're not just witnessing a sporting event. You're witnessing humanity's most ambitious experiment in channeling competition towards something greater than conquest. You're seeing the continuation of a vision that began in ancient Olympia and was reborn through the determination of dreamers who believed the world needed heroes more than it needed enemies. The Olympics were created because someone understood that excellence, shared and celebrated, becomes the foundation upon which civilizations build their finest achievements. And that flame will keep burning as long as humans refuse to accept that good enough is ever truly good enough.